What has been so phenomenal is how many people have come from throughout the country. We have people from Oregon, California, Montana, Massachusetts, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Florida. I can't think of the Southwest. I can't think of a region. We have some people from Canada as well. We have people coming in. And why have they come here? I really think it's that history that the Shawnee has in activism. Local people fighting to protect their environment. And we've got an incredibly rich history of that here in Southern Illinois, here in the Shawnee Hills, the Shawnee National Forest.
Well, could you give us a 30,000-foot view of some of that history? I mean, there was protest, there was litigation, there was a stay, and where are we at now? Is this a forest endangered?
So in the 1980s, there was a very big push to get timber out of the national forests, especially in the late 1980s. And that's when folks started to organize in the Shawnee. They organized, they lobbied their representatives, their senators. They began to appeal timber sales and actually go to court to fight some of the timber sales. We had won an injunction back in 1996 that shut down logging for it was about 22 years. The injunction was lifted in 2013. And now we're steep into it. It is back. It has come back with a vengeance, and here we are back at the same crossroads. But we have the difference is we have so much more to lose right now.
So back in the 80s and 90s, there was some success. Was that a legal success? Was that a political success? Was that a protest success? What's your thoughts on that?
The success that took place in the 90s was a great friend of mine has it's probably not his quote, but I use it all the time and I credit him, Sam Stearns, for endless pressure, endlessly applied. We had letter writing, we had presentations, we had direct action, nonviolent direct action in logging roads. We had litigation. It was incredible. When in 1991, when the Fairview timber sale was cut, our congressman was there before the log trucks arrived that morning, before daylight. We had our entire U.S. congressional delegation asked the Forest Service not to cut the Fairview timber sale. And I remember sitting in the middle of that logging road. I'd spent the summer, 77 days, camped out in the middle of a logging road, going down to the Fairview woodlands. And I remember as it became apparent that the Forest Service was about to move in, and it hit me that it would probably be better for the movement. You know, it was crushing. To actually admit that I love Fairview, and to admit that if they log this, they're going to lose. You know, and if they stop, they hold up, there's a good chance that they would win. You know, but that's the mistake they made. They went into Fairview. Hundreds of people gathered that day, several days. You know, it was an incredible effort. But it didn't stop there. The momentum was built. And it wasn't long before the large, big environmental groups, Sierra Club, Audubon Society, were joining our ranks. I believe Fairview had over 30 arrests took place surrounding the Fairview woodlands. Civil rights lawsuit ensued from the treatment by law enforcement. The timber company, East Perry Lumber from Frona, Missouri, was who happened to have their timber buyer was a timber cruiser for the Shawnee National Forest before he went to work for the lumber company. And Fairview was it. They were the big logger in the Shawnee back then, and nobody else was getting the good hardwoods. They were the powerful, the dominant sawmill, and Fairview was the last one. They had another contract that they sold to somebody else. It became clear that it wasn't worth it to them. Of course, interestingly enough, I believe the Fairview timber sale cost somewhere in the neighborhood, or the timber was sold somewhere in the neighborhood of $55,000. It cost $43,000 to put the road in. That road that washed out twice after that had to be rebuilt. By the end of the entire summer encampment, we did win a stay on the Fairview timber sale in 1990. It gave us a year before it was actually logged. By the end of this sale being executed, the Forest Service had spent almost $600,000. I believe it was $589,000 to get that $55,000 timber sale out.
But this is public land. Are you saying what were the economics of cutting forests back then? These were commercial endeavors. Were the companies cutting, paying a fair price, or was that pretty much a subsidy?
The United States Forest Service flatly and plainly has and still subsidizes the timber industry. And I'm not against subsidizing our government subsidizing certain industries. It's very, it's important. Our government has to subsidize our forests for one. I don't expect the U.S. Forest Service to make money off the Shawnee National Forest, but if they're going to strip the components out of the ecosystem, then they should do it. They shouldn't do it at a loss. And the U.S. Forest Service has never made any money on any timber sale in the Shawnee National Forest. They always end up costing more than they sell it. And who loses? The forest loses, the taxpayers lose. Even some of the most conservative people have joined our cause because they can't stand the government waste. And that is what it ends up being, a subsidy to the industry that is extracting this important resource, the timber. There's more to a forest than timber, don't get me wrong, but it is truly a resource that we use. Wood is an important resource that we use. But we don't want to subsidize the extraction industry that takes it away from us. We want to subsidize the people that are growing for us so that they're motivated to not cut their trees down and to not destroy the ecosystem. But yes, the U.S. Forest Service sells our trees at a loss, a terrible loss, and it's bargain basement prices for the industry.
I do have one more question. Does this feel like it did before, when the forest was in threat, when things were starting to kick off, or does it feel different?
There's a different feeling than back in the late 80s and early 90s. And the biggest difference is I have, from in my heart and my brain, I've got so much more background as to activism and fighting the good fight. I really have a different perspective. I went into the 1980s, not the late 80s, not knowing what I was doing, but I knew it was right. And I still have that. I know it's right, but there's much more experience. There's knowledge. I know now what I'm probably going to have to take on. Um, I wished I didn't have to. I remember being asked numerous times, don't you have something better to do? No, I can't think of anything better to do than to fight for the forest. And so that is back. But the perspective is so much more beneficial. What's going to be different is working with these other people. That's new to me, and I welcome it. And in diversity is strength, and I'm feeling strong here.